Hello, everyone, and welcome to Accessible Tech Thursdays. Today we're covering assessment, joined with myself, Neil Beck. We've got Erica Smith, and today we've got from the ACE Centre, Sarah Dale. Thank you for joining me. So if you've got any questions, feel free to put those in the chat box or ask them at the end, and we'll do our best to answer them. So why are we doing assessment? Why is this such an important area? It's because assessment is today's means of modifying tomorrow's instruction. So what we do initially to work out what the learner's needs are will have a big impact on what's to come. So a few questions to think about. What do you think would be the cumulative effect of not having optimal access to the curriculum through years and years of school? Now, my experience has been that if you find a learner who hasn't had that, you will often have behavioral issues, you'll have kind of low self-esteem, and you'll have someone who's not performing to the level that they should be. So with the previous question in mind, how long do we spend assessing learners for accessible technology to help them to access the curriculum? And with that in mind as well, how long should we be spending doing that? So I think often the answer in many schools, just to make people feel a little bit better, is sometimes the answer is no time or some time, but quite casually. So I think we want to get people to start thinking that assessment should be for learners with SEN around technology and should be a standard, really. And so if you're starting from point zero, today is for you. If you're along the line and you want to learn more, today is also for you. We don't want people being scared or intimidated by this whole process. There's a lot to it, but ultimately, if you just start and you get going, you'll get results, and the support is here and we can help you. So what's the value of accessible tech assessments? Well, it can help with target setting. It can enhance transdisciplinary working because we're sharing that same knowledge on the learner. And you might have a particular therapist who's not a specialist with technology, and you're just helping them to play to their strengths and you're playing to yours. It meets changes in inspection requirements. There is now an expectation that technology will be used in productive ways to enhance the learning of classes. It ensures the value of existing technology. So often people will start with, oh, let's buy some iPads, or let's buy laptops for every child. But actually, how much value are you getting out of that if a percentage of those classes can't access that technology? It provides better access to the curriculum, and learners can actually prove their abilities. You're not caught on them doing things that they can't do over and over again. You're actually focusing on what they can do and playing to their strengths. So the assessments are where this all starts off. And we're lucky enough to have Sarah Dale from the ACE Centre just to talk through with us about what is important with assistive technology assessments. And sorry, I think we had a problem with the sound there. Let me just restart that. There we go.
Hello, my name's Sarah Dale. I work at ACE Centre and I'm an AAC consultant there, and I'm going to talk to you today about assistive technology assessment. When we think about the assistive technology assessment process, it's not something that's just a one-off event. It is a process and there's several components to it. Starting at the beginning, there has to be that recognised need, and identifying what that need is and defining it is an important part of the process. We need to be clear what the purpose of the assistive technology is for and how it's going to meet that identified need. Then we think about setting goals, aims and objectives from that need, and that leads to some implementation, which we monitor and modify and then review, and very typically that cycle goes round again. So what do we mean by identifying need? It's really thinking about what tasks are difficult and maybe looking at how they're currently achieved, and thinking about therefore where may the assistive technology fit in? Where does it enable someone to do something that they would otherwise find difficult? So we really need to look at what the current level of performance is on any of those tasks, and then explore ways that the assistive technology might benefit. So it helps to really think about defining that need quite accurately so that you can start to explore what the solutions might be and really evaluate whether the assistive technology achieves that ultimate goal of meeting that need. So we really need to think about what information we need and also how we gather it. And really from the outset, I would recommend that thinking about gathering data, ways to demonstrate whether the assistive technology does actually meet that need is really important. So having recognised there is a need for technology somewhere, that it's going to be of benefit, it's helpful to define the goals, aims and objectives through the process. So thinking about what that overall goal is for the individual. It might be a longer term goal, it might be a lifelong goal, but the important point here is it's what the individual wants to achieve. Sometimes it might be about increasing output, other times it might be increasing efficiency or reducing effort to achieve a task, whatever that task is. It's helpful to define that goal and then break that down into some smaller aims and objectives. So the aims are the steps to achieve that ambition. Thinking about what the assistive technology could be to achieve some of those steps. So it will usually state the activity the person will perform under specific conditions and to a particular degree of success. And that then sets a benchmark by where we can measure, does the assistive technology achieve that aim? It's also helpful then to think about the objectives, and these are often the smaller steps to actually achieve that aim. And there may be different components that need to be considered in that process. Can't talk about assistive technology assessment without thinking about the HAAT model, the Human Activity Assistive Technology Model. So this defines someone doing an activity with assistive technology, thinking about the human, the physical, cognitive, emotional factors, doing an activity that's been identified, whether that's self-care, productivity, leisure activity, using the assistive technology as an enabler in a given context. And we need to think about all of these components when we're setting those goals, aims and objectives.
Great, thanks Sarah, and sorry we had some problems with the sound there. I think we're going to bring in Erica now to talk a little bit about the SETT.
Thank you. So within our school, we use the SETT model, which I think follows on from what Sarah was saying. We're looking at the individual student and what their needs are. And actually, where are the needs? It might not be in every single lesson all the time. What tasks are expected of that student? Where might the assistive technology support them? And then what tools actually do we need for that task? So I thought I would give you a bit of a case study of a little boy who is not so little anymore. The picture's a couple of years out of date, but this is Riley, and he is a young boy with cerebral palsy, and it impacts on his fine and gross motor skills, his communication and his learning. So, but in different environments, his needs obviously are different. So within the classroom setting and interacting, the needs for his communication, to support his communication, require different tools than they do when he's in the playground or in the lunch hall, that noisier environment. So when we look at the task, we look at supporting both his communication, his computer access, and developing his literacy skills, which we require different tools for different tasks in different environments. So, for example, within the classroom, he uses a communication book, and he uses a stand for his iPad, and he also uses a key guard to help with that access. When he's in the playground, he has a speaker for his iPad so that he can be heard better with amongst his friends. We use mid-tech tools, so mid-tech assistive technology. So he will use a switch to the computer, but again, obviously he doesn't need those tools all the time, and he uses a big keyboard to support his literacy. And he has an app for his communication on his iPad, and he also uses Clicker and Reading Avenue to support his literacy. So it's looking at the different environment and then matching the tools that's appropriate for that task. Thanks, Neil.
Great, thanks, Erica. And how's Riley getting on at the moment?
He's fantastic. He's doing really well. Very keen to communicate in and use his device in social situations more than it used to be. Very kind of structured, and then when you go out to play, everything was left and he'd just be, you know. But now that he's got the speaker and he can be heard amongst his friends in the, you know, in the playground or in the lunch hall, he's much more motivated.
Great, thanks. And how long did that initial assessment take, that first time that you assessed his needs?
To be honest, it's been ongoing for a few years, because as he's grown and matured, he's understood the need for more assistive technologies to help him. So I think with a level of maturity, it's kind of come that understanding and the time to teach him to use that technology, which we've talked about before, haven't we, in other webinars. It is important to allow him time to become familiar with the tools.
Great, yeah, and I think that's a really important point, that often the assessment is the starting point. Assessment can be short or it can be long, but the important thing is that it's an ongoing process. And
yeah,
Sarah spoke about it. It is a process and a cyclical.
Yeah.
So if you're new to assessments, or you're looking to kind of audit or get some idea on the kind of quality that you're performing at with these, we've got a tool called the TechAbility standards. They're completely free, open source to use, as long as you kind of credit where they've come from. And these are some of the areas that they list as the key things that you want to look out for, the key factors. So number one is trained staff. So learners being assessed for their technology needs by appropriately trained and experienced staff. That's really important, and some of the information that we'll give later on during these slides will show what additional value that brings. A standardized assessment, so it doesn't mean that all learners are assessed the same way, but it does mean that there's a common procedure and common outcomes so that people can all be on the same page with things. Setting a review point is important. So I'd imagine Riley, the case study that we were just talking about, he'd have had a review point set on a short-term and long-term, and based on needs, really. So some learners maybe won't need much of a review point. Once you set them up, they might be independent enough and they might carry on. So thinking of learners who are using text-to-speech maybe, and are good with IT skills, it might be less necessary for them to have a review point in the future. Appropriate environment is important, and I've actually got two examples of places that I've done assessments in the past, which I thought would be interesting to show. So the one on the left, very basic, not having any kind of height adjustable desks, and really quite a busy room with people coming in and out of. The one on the right is a little bit better because you've got some space specifically there for a learner, so you're not going to get disturbed. There maybe might not be enough room to kind of come around and observe the learner, which might be quite tricky. And something else you want to consider is height adjustable chairs and desks for certain learners. Some learners might need set chairs so that there's no chance of slipping or falling out of it. So just worth thinking about the ergonomics of the environment that you're going to be assessing in, and also what environment they're going to be working in and learning in, and trying to make it real. Carrying on with the TechAbility standards, it's important to have accessible documentation. So this can be delivered by teaching professionals. It's important to have the appropriate equipment. So working out what equipment you need for your cohort of learners. And that might be very different if you're in a specialist school than if you're in a mainstream school. And it can be quite difficult to find out what equipment you should have as standard to assess. But you can start to build that from the assessments themselves. As you find commonalities, you can learn what bits of equipment are the most important. We've also got in the TechAbility standards a specific section on tools, so you can explore those. We go through cause and effects, physical access, which will be things like keyboards, mice, roller balls. We've also got text-to-speech tools, prediction tools, speech and dictation, so you're thinking of headsets, looking at the physical environment they're in, so thinking about mounting. Auditory navigation, which is where you'd use your voice to navigate a phone or tablet or computer. Zoom functions on any particular software, so you can see things much clearer, and screen readers as well. So those are some of the tools, and you can kind of flick through and see which ones might be useful for your learners. It's just to get you started really, and to give you an idea of some of the type of things that can be used. It's also important to remember that although often we talk about assessment with learners with their either their computer or the device that they're using predominantly, it's also worth thinking about assessments, thinking about how they use mobile phones, and if this is going to be a tool they're going to have with them and it's going to be useful. So we've got on our EdTech demonstrator program, Accessible Tech Thursdays playlist, specifically a video on mobile, so that's worth having a look if you're interested in that. So what do we do with all the information once we've gathered it? We need it to be available for either the support staff or who they're going on to work with, and sometimes parents and other stakeholders too. So we've got some different examples of learner profiles here, and you have to decide what is best for your context and the people that are working with your learner. So this one's very visual. We've got some pictures of a Manfrotto arm with a jelly bean switch attached. We've got a joy cable, which is a device that connects a switch to a computer. I've got the specific software, which is Grid 3 and Switch Driver, and that helps you to be able to use the switch input to make it useful. And then we've also got a picture of the setup of the switch on the student's chair. So that's very visual, and that's a kind of at a glance profile. To contrast that, we've got something that's in a learner profile here, and I've just pulled out one chunk of this. So this would be amongst all their other details. So you'd have a sensory profile, perhaps. You might have things about what they're learning in the different subjects. You might have their targets. It can be quite a comprehensive document, and this can be just a small block within there. So this one says that the learner is right-handed, prefers to use a touch screen to navigate and an on-screen keyboard to type. For this reason, it's good to have the screen set to a good height through use of a height adjustable table and close enough for him to reach comfortably. So very basic there, and that might suit those of you that have a kind of built-in system for student profiles. And then this is a one-page profile that I created, and I've shared in the shared folder as well, so you can access this and use this if you want to start with assessments. And it just gives some prompt questions. They're not exhaustive, you don't have to use these questions, but it just gives you an idea of what questions to ask and what things to look out for. So this particular learner has a mobile phone that he uses at home that he doesn't carry so much in case he falls. He's got computers at school. He likes to use YouTube videos. He uses technology for his schoolwork and to access Facebook, as many young learners do. He wants more help with technologies to help him with his classwork and to make plans with friends. Text was quite difficult to navigate for this learner, and he finds it difficult to switch with new devices or systems. So we, once we'd completed that, we set a review point of March 2021, so we could come back and have a look at how this learner was getting on. We had some almost shorter, kind of punchier things to help when you're assessing, just be able to fill things out as we go along. So whether they're left or right-handed, whether they have glasses, kind of commonly used hardware there, what text size they can access, whether they need a line focus, a single click to open. But this could be different based on your learner's needs. This was very much tailored to the cohort that we were working with. And then some of the more commonly used software, so whether it was text-to-speech, prediction, and dictation. And as you can see there, dictation was to be explored in future because we thought it might be a bit too overwhelming at this point, and we'd already introduced them to some new software. This is an example of a more detailed and thorough assessment. So we're looking at 11 pages here, including the introduction, the background, the observation itself, the recommendations broken down with the exact equipment, and a front page summary, which gives you a executive summary of what's needed for that learner. So I've also included that in the folder if you want to have a look through there. And now we've got Sarah to talk a little bit more about implementation.
So having identified what the need is and defined that need, we need to recognise what the individual requires, what the activity is, what the assistive technology solutions might be, and then we can start to explore ways to implement it. I'd say it's really important to think about all the roles and the support that different roles provide around the individual who's going to be using assistive technology. There are many different components to think about, whether it be their need for support around the actual setting it up, there is support around learning how to use it. There are going to be different elements that are required, some maintenance of that equipment, funding of that equipment, lots of different things to consider. In the implementation process, we really need to learn how to use that assistive technology. Some solutions require quite significant learning and quite significant setups to make it purposeful and appropriate for the individual. And in that learning process, it's really helpful to think about RAG rating tasks, your red, amber, green components, whether that be from an access perspective and thinking that maybe there's new learning around the physical motor planning that's needed, the physical movement to control that assistive technology, or the cognitive aspects of the task, and indeed even the cognitive aspects of that access method, and the communication demands as well. So thinking linguistically, what are the demands of the task and balancing all those different components. So if one aspect is really difficult, if the access is a red rating, it's a new skill that's being learned, we want to make sure that the cognitive demands of the task being achieved when we're introducing that assistive technology are lower, so we're on a green rating. So we've never balanced, never have two red demands being put on the individual. Try and balance out those different components. And the implementation process, it's really important to think about ways to gather data. How do we really know if this technology is making a difference and enabling the person to achieve what they set out to achieve? So if there are ways we can measure over time whether if the activity is about increasing output, how much can we achieve within a given time frame, or can we measure ways that we can sustain that activity if the activity is around reducing fatigue? Can we produce a greater amount of output before tiring? Or can we speed up efficiency to achieve the same task? Are there ways that we can explore gathering data to demonstrate that that assistive technology has made a difference and achieved the outcomes that we were hoping for? Once we had a chance to go into actually trying to use the technology, getting used to using it, learning how to use it, we inevitably need to modify that setup. And we need to monitor that and really use the data gathered to maybe refine some of those settings with the technology to make it work appropriately. So refine the setups and keep reflecting back. Is that technology enabling the person to achieve their objectives and their aims and their ultimate goal? And that takes the cycle round to review. So we can review those goals, aims and objectives, have a look at the achievements being made. I would suggest it's really important to document that progress. It's really helpful whether it's documenting settings of the assistive technology, positioning of the assistive technology, absolute features about how it's being used, and things that haven't worked and things that have worked, because it is a cyclical process, and as the process goes round, often we identify other needs and we refine and we go through that cycle again. So having some really good documentation, I would say, is very helpful. So that's a very quick summary of the assistive technology assessment process, through from identifying and defining a need, through setting some aims and objectives into implementation, monitoring those and modifying, and then back with the review. It's a cyclical process and likely to go through many iterations.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And now Eric is going to talk through some of the considerations.
I think Sarah has touched on it previously, just that actually, you know, how is the student going to access that technology? I know we've covered access in our previous webinars. For anyone that's not accessed our playlist, we've talked about, you know, switches. Is it going to be accessed through eye pointing, direct access, and considering those physical factors? And that's where we recommend that it's essential that you liaise with your physiotherapist and your occupational therapist before implementing that equipment, to see which is the most reliable access method, and which is the safest option. And I am very much like Neil. I have those visual learner profiles stuck all around our communication room and classrooms, because actually it's so important, not only for consistency but for safety, that actually we have the picture of how the switch should be mounted. I'm thinking of one, I started using it for one pupil who had a visual impairment, and he needed to know that his switch was always in the same place. So, and the best way to do that was to take a picture and have it all over the classroom so that the staff knew exactly how it should be set up. So he had that consistency. And for other students, obviously, it is a massive safety consideration as well. So you need to look at what technology is already being used in your school, and who is going to be responsible. As Sarah said, it takes time and it takes a team to implement, train and update the technology. I think we've discussed before in previous webinars about how getting into assistive technology tends to be from maybe personal interest, and it might start with one or two people. I would definitely recommend that if this is something you're starting in your school and you're very much at the beginning stage, that actually from personal experience, it needs to be a team. It's very difficult to do that, the process of reviewing and updating and evaluating that effectiveness if you're responsible for training and sourcing and funding. So it does need that whole team process. I'm very fortunate that we have really great IT support from our local authority, but that's taken many years to establish for them to understand. When I'll say, can you just put this software on? And like, we don't know what this software is. This is very specific software. And, you know, I've been supporting schools through the demonstrator program, where it's quite a common barrier is if you're asking for something to be installed on a school network, and maybe it's people that don't understand what that technology is for. So I'm kind of on a bit of a mission to get our local authority IT support when we can go back to doing things like A-Centre Network Days or any upskilling around assistive technology, because they're more familiar with the broader accessibility options, but maybe not the more specific software.
Great, thanks, Erica. We're going to talk a little bit about evidence and how this is a really useful guide, isn't it, Erica, that both of us have used in the past?
Yeah, I came across this quite recently, thanks to Sarah, and I think for me personally in school, it's that more formal reflection tool, and it helps to gather that data, as Sarah talked about in a video. How are we going to gather that data, and who are we asking to input on that data? Because sometimes it can be people are maybe blindsided by a piece of tech and they think, oh, I really want one of those. I've had parents, I really want an eye gaze. And actually, you need to work through those questions. Then is that going to be the best piece of technology for that student? So I think it helps frame those questions, and definitely to go back and measure and evaluate the effectiveness. So I think this is a really useful tool. So some of the questions that will come up, as we talked about at the very beginning, you know, what are the difficulties? Can assistive technology help solve that problem? What technology is needed? I think you'll have some staff who are very about the tech and some about the need. So it's about making sure you work through those questions, evaluating the impact of gathering that data. Is that tool making a difference? As Neil said, are you investing a lot of time and resources into a tool that actually it's not having a great degree of accuracy? So how much time are you investing in that? And which tool should be chosen? It's difficult because I think this comes with experience. This is where you're kind of relying on your assistive technology support within school, whoever that may be, because you need to have an understanding of the technology that's out there to know which tool to select. And I think it's really key to be marking what is happening, you know, what is the degree of success when using that technology. So yeah, it is important, as I just mentioned, that everybody agrees on the questions, or the questions that you want answered, to help focus on what those goals that Sarah spoke about, what those goals are going to be. And I think it helps, in my experience, I think it's useful for teachers to have a think about how that technology will be used. Because as I mentioned, you'll have some that want the technology because they think the answer is going to be an iPad for communication, but actually you've all got to be clear and you've got to be working towards the same goals and the same objectives.
Great, thanks, Eric. Just wanted to take a moment to thank Sarah Dale for her input. Thank you, Sarah. And,
very welcome.
Yeah, just wondered if you wanted to say a word about the A-Centre and what people can come to you for.
Yeah, well, A-Centre, we are a national charity, have offices based in Oldham and in Oxford, and our services are there to support people who may benefit from technology, to help either with their communication, the learning, access to education as well. And we provide advice and information services, so people can contact us on our free phone number, We run information day appointments and have a number of other services to support the use of technology for people with physical communication disabilities.
Great. Well, it's been wonderful to have you on, and I think everyone will find it really useful. What we've also done is taken the video that you submitted and have it in full in the resources folder. So if people want to view the video back, they can do. Just going to take a moment to some upcoming webinars that we've got. So we've just had assessment webinar. Next up, we've got Physical Kit Plus, which is going to be going into more advanced active methods. So we're thinking about eye gaze and head pointers and along those kind of lines. We've got a mental health webinar coming up on the 7th of January 2021. And then we've got one focusing on sensory, which will be on the 14th of January. And that'll include a drop-in as well. So if you have any individual learner issues that you'd like to bring to us, then if you want to access any of our past or upcoming webinars, you can do that through the link there, bit.ly, ATT, and then HURS. And thank you, Erica. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you everyone who's listened in. If you want to know more and sign up for assistance through the demonstrator project, you can do that through edtech-demonstrator.lgfl.net. We've got our YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn and Facebook links there on the right hand side. And I'll finish there, but I'll leave the chat open. So feel free if there's any questions or comments. Thank you, everyone.